difference a day makes. What a difference a day makes. Wall Street liking the temporary, or hopefully it holds, 2-week ceasefire. After all, heck was going to break loose last night. Markets are shooting up more than 1,200 points this morning. Oil surging downward 20%, $92 a barrel. And our poll question up on X this morning has to do with the ceasefire and breaking the action over the next 2 weeks. Do you think it will hold? That's our poll question on X at the Pulse of an H. Do you think the 2-week ceasefire will hold? Yes or no? And I'm going to come back to this, but first of all, good morning, New Hampshire. Good morning up into Maine. We have additional FM signal strength for you, 98.7 FM HD2, 98.1 FM, 107.3 FM in the lakes, 98.3 FM HD2 in the lakes, 107.7 FM. Hey, worldwide. Hey, Alexa, hey, Google, play the Pulse of an H. Big kudos not only to the Prime Minister of Pakistan for playing a key role here in the 11th hour, but Steve Witkoff. And amazing story there. I'm going to come back to Steve Witkoff. Someone should be a very humble, quiet guy. And he secured largely the hostage release in Gaza with Hamas, and I can't believe he's right at the center of this one. J-Dog, back from his trip to Cleveland. I guess it was chilly there like it was here, but you went to some Guardian games and beyond, and good to have you back, buddy.
I'm back. Here we go.
J-Dog, before we get into the show, John Decker, our own White House correspondent, would like to talk about this morning live in just a moment right here. Good morning, New Hampshire, the Pulse of NH, and we surely are. J-Dog, we before we get going this morning, of course, we're gonna have a lot going on this morning, a lot of updates. What a difference a day makes, and we're gonna talk a little bit though this morning about affordable housing. Our friends from Procon, and one of their business leaders talking about their approach and how they're making solutions work on affordable housing, because there's not much affordable to buy or rent right here. And also Andrew from Colette Travel will be in the 10 o'clock hour talking about and could be your trip to the British Isles later in October. But again, market shooting up this morning, and liking this agreement. And if it holds, and I hope it does, we'll see quite a difference. Now, we're already hearing this morning that a couple tankers have passed through the Strait of Hormuz. And, it's interesting. The only thing that's kind of there's a lot to talk about in the last 12, 24 hours, because last night, as we got near the 8 p.m. deadline, the president was really bearing down and holding that until word of an agreement or tentative agreement in a ceasefire 2-week deal. But again, Pakistan played a key role here. The Prime Minister of Pakistan played a key role. And this could have been, I don't know if we'll know. And hopefully we won't know. The president had been vowing to take out the power plants, the bridges, send Iran back to the Stone Age. And then that strange line on Truth Social yesterday morning, I guess, that John Decker verified, that an entire civilization will die tonight. That was bizarre and over the top, in my humble opinion, even if you say the president was trying to show the severity and leverage and use that. But I think that one, that was a strange one. But whatever Steve Witkoff and our negotiators and the Pakistan prime minister did, and apparently the Iranians, if they can spread word to these rogue, loyal Revolutionary Guard type military around the country, or people with AK-47s and a surface-to-air missile, not to use it. We'll see if this holds, and I hope it does. John Decker, what a difference a day makes, our White House correspondent. Good morning, John.
Well, that's right. What a difference a day makes, but it's not yet clear what this deal entails. Yes, it entails a 2-week ceasefire, and yes, it calls for reopening the Strait of Hormuz. But Iran is claiming that after this conflict is over, it will control the strait. It will collect tolls for all ships that travel through the strait. That did not exist before this conflict began, and that would mean significant amounts of additional revenue for Iran. It also potentially is ending without the U.S. achieving one of its goals, and that is preventing Iran from achieving a nuclear weapon. The U.S. has not secured all of that uranium that Iran has in its possession.
And any one of these points, and I think they're going to have some talks in Pakistan later this week, or in a few days, but any one of these points, because I was pointing out yesterday, it was all about the Strait of Hormuz and the power plants and bridges. No one was mentioning the uranium, supposedly 1,000 pounds of uranium. any one of these points becomes a sticking point in the next week or two, and the president gets upset again, or they get upset, this thing can go sideways.
Yeah, it could, and that's why I think it's too soon to evaluate who the winner, who the losers are. It has just taken hold. We'll see if it continues to take hold. Israel has bought into this 2-week ceasefire as well. We'll see if that part of the equation holds. But the president had indicated as early as yesterday that it still hadn't achieved all of America's goals. And the name goal is making certain that Iran does not develop a nuclear weapon.
And that was the auspices or the genesis to get into this thing, right? To stop them from ever the Revolutionary Guard or the Ayatollah or the new Ayatollah, the Supreme or the Islamic State from ever getting a nuclear bomb, because that could be disastrous. John, was a sense yesterday, because it was quite tense going into the afternoon. I kind of was checking news every 10 minutes in the afternoon, just wondering and concerned, because I personally thought, devastating a country of 90 million people, a lot of the goodwill that maybe we had versus the Islamic State would go the other way. But I'm glad that we didn't. But at the same time, did you get a sense that an agreement was going to be reached yesterday afternoon? Did you get a sense that that we were this close? And did Steve Witkoff, has he played a key role in this once again, like he did in Gaza?
Look, I think that the entity that played the key roles here were Pakistan and China. Yes, China. China played a very critical role in convincing Iran to sign on to this peace deal and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. That was, as the president said on Monday at his press conference, as you know, a priority for the president. And now the strait is reopened. And we'll see, what that looks like, a month from now. If it's still a situation where there's easy passage for oil tankers and cargo ships to go through the strait without having to pay any type of toll.
It doesn't surprise me, because I was saying throughout this to my people close to me, I was saying, not to sound like a foreign policy detective, but I was wondering why China was being so reticent and laid back through this whole thing, because they have pretty good ties to Tehran and the Islamic State.
Yeah,
and then you look at what they get through that Strait of Hormuz. You look at how much oil and energy and stuff that China moves through there. And I thought if anyone could influence whoever's calling the shots there to stand down on the strait, it was China. So there you go.
Yeah, you're right. And it gives you a sense, when China exerts its diplomatic efforts, they can get progress. And, you look long term, if you get China involved as well in ending the war in Ukraine, they too could flex their political and diplomatic muscles there as well.
And you remember, this, President Trump was set to go to visit with the Chinese leader and postpone that because of this. So I'm sure we were also probably talking to Beijing behind the scenes as well, I imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm sure the idea here was you need to get involved unless the president could postpone that trip once again. It's now scheduled for mid-May. I'll be on that trip. But the president, I'm sure, made it quite clear to China that they needed to be involved in this diplomatic process as well.
I mean, you can say that this is a smaller situation than the Cuban Missile Crisis, but if you look at some of the diplomacy behind the scenes with the Kennedy team and Nikita Khrushchev and the Soviet Union, and then it came down to missiles in Turkey, of all things, that Khrushchev was okay, if you remove those, we'll get the missiles out of Cuba. I mean, that back channel diplomacy was key to the 11th hour.
Oh, absolutely. You're right about that. History sometimes repeats itself. I don't see the complete analogous situation with what happened, between the United States and Iran. But again, this is something that we'll need to evaluate. I think it's too soon, quite frankly, Jack, to be talking about winners and losers here. We'll see how things proceed over the course of the next 2 weeks, with talks continuing between the United States and Iran.
John Decker, thank you, John.
Thank you.
And then will it hold? And, the next 2 weeks, because it doesn't take much for these things to go sideways if both sides are claiming victory and sort of getting ahead of your skis here. And things like the uranium controlling that, or ultimately who's going to call the shots with the Strait of Hormuz. This thing could go sideways. I hope it holds. I do. I mean, I think the other thing we need to realize, and yes, Wall Street is way up. this morning, shooting up like a, like a pinball or the thing in the Cirque Carnival there when you hit the thing and it goes straight up 1,200 points and oil surging downward. Last time I checked, 20% down already this morning, and that's already 92 cents a barrel. But this economy and, this administration, the president, it started with Venezuela and the buildup there, and then it shifted to the Middle East. This administration's been doing a lot of things outside of the country, and I'm not saying they're not good. I'm not saying they're not essential. That's not my point. But in some commentary, I think a lot of people voted for this administration over Kamala Harris and Waltz because of the economy. And you look at how expensive things are, and I think that focusing on some of that sometimes is kind of what the customers wanted, even if you are embroiled in international conflict. Hey, Alexa, hey, Google, play the Pulse of an H. When we come back, Neil Vec, Institute of Politics, St. Anselm College. What does the public think about all this right here at home? Back in a moment. What's the number one health issue?
Jack Heath on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
A reminder, we're on YouTube at the Pulse of an H, the first hour of the show as well, if you want to view live. Our poll question up on X at the Pulse of an H. Do you think this ceasefire, the 2-week period here with Iran, will hold while negotiations for a more definitive agreement take place? Yes or no? I hope they do. Neil Vec, one of our political analysts and experts at All Stars, Institute of Politics, Executive Director, St. Anselm College. Good morning, Mr. Neil.
Good morning, Jack.
We're good morning. As John Decker, our White House correspondent, just cautioned, he thinks it's a little early for anyone, including the United States and the Iranian authorities, whoever they are now, to get out there and start jumping up and down and claiming victory on this 2-week ceasefire and working on an agreement. However, a lot of people are probably relieved, including me, yesterday afternoon. But publicly here at home, I know the jury's probably of public opinion still out, but people have seen gas prices shoot up to about $4 a gallon. Now, it's true this morning markets are liking this 2-week period ceasefire. Markets shot up 1,200 points. Oil's down 20%, $92 a barrel. We don't know if this will hold, but how is this whole thing, going over here at home with the majority of like New Hampshire informed voters, independent voters? Where's the jury of public opinion here right at home, Neil?
I think that the jury is out, and I think people are optimistic that maybe something is happening here. I think that there are a lot of questions like who has agreed to this on the Iranian side. They're declaring victory, but it's a rather odd victory. Is this going to hold? But that being said, I think on the long-term political level, I think as you get into sort of the midterm elections, if for some reason Trump pulls this off by basically eliminating a terrorist threat and also doing what he did in Venezuela and potentially in Cuba, yes, the gas prices have gone up, but if they start to go down and things start to settle out, he could have what he has had in the past, which is he has taken some risks, and the president, I don't know if it's luck or if it's grand strategy, but he sometimes comes out ahead on it, and he comes out. I mean, I think Venezuela is a classic example, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a tremendous amount of gloom and doom. All kinds of terrible things are going to happen, and it really never transpired. And he was successful in what he did, I would opine, but I do think the jury's out. I think people are cautiously optimistic, but
right.
We're dealing with some really bad characters, and you just never know. I remember the mission accomplished thing with George W. Bush.
A little premature. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Neil, certainly in the economy, people have to see it and feel it, right? People have to see it and feel it to believe it. They can't be told it. And if they see and feel things starting to settle down and get better, and then look around the world and say, when the dust settles and the smoke, clears, they might say, wow. But one thing about, because I don't, for example, I know, and I was hoping the president was negotiating through strong words yesterday, but this 8 p.m. deadline and then putting out on Truth Social, a whole civilization will die tonight. That was a little bit over the top, in my humble opinion. There were ways to probably say something as effective, but that one drew the reaction of everyone from New Hampshire's congressional delegation online to other critics. But one thing about Donald Trump, and I just didn't really, I heed your words on Venezuela because it's a good example. It's like his first term and then the period and losing and then running again and beating Harris and Walz, even after the Democrats did the old shiftaroo and, screwed over Biden, if you will, and snatched the nomination or forced him to give it up, because I think that was forced. I don't think he and Joe Biden did that on their own. But anyway, everyone thought Harris was going to be tough to beat, and polls had it very tight, and Donald Trump and Vance won pretty handily that night in the battleground state. So just when you think Donald Trump is out, we had Jim Messina on our Contacts Politics podcast, the big Democrat advisor and very close confidant with Barack Obama, say something about, one thing about Trump is he's the best puncher and fighter in the business. He's an incredible fighter. And if he does what you say, just when you thought this thing was going sideways, he kind of gets the last laugh, if you will. I'm not going to minimize this, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit. I think that, and I don't remember the history of this too much, but when Reagan went and said, tear down this wall, I think a lot of people, a lot of liberal pundits in particular were like, that's never going to happen. Why the hell did he say that? It was a bunch of bullshit. Why did he do that? And I'm hoping that you just block that word out. But why did Trump say what he said? Well, I think a lot of people understand that he and he understands that the people in the Middle East a lot of the times only respond to tremendous violence in some cases.
Fear is all they understand. Fear.
Over the top. The words were over the top.
Right.
But today we're sitting here with a potential resolution to this whole thing. So
right.
I'm going to play devil's advocate and say, yes, it was over the top, but somebody responded to those things saying that was over the top. And sometimes American presidents say things and they get criticized, for what they've said.
Yeah.
Reagan with Star Wars, there's another one. And, the point is
good point. No, it's a very good point, Neil.
Over time.
No, it's a very good point to bring up the reference of tear down this wall and some things that break. What was he talking about? And you're right. The one thing that terrorists and the Islamic State understands, they don't understand diplomacy. They understand fear. That's all they understand is fear. And don't kid yourself. Maybe what they saw with the SEAL team and the Delta team getting our down crew member there on Easter Sunday didn't hurt. But if you look at what we've done, I think the last lever here was the Strait of Hormuz. And when we put down a few bombs on Karg Island, where they export 90% of their oil, that's their money. And China, I think the other thing no one knows is I think China picked up the, no pun intended, the red phone. I don't mean that from a communist point of view. I'm talking like actually the color red phone, and probably called whoever it is in Tehran, the head of the Revolutionary Guard, and spoke to the president. And I think China said to the bad guys in Iran or wherever they are, saying, open the strait and do it fast. Open the strait and agree to end this, because we get a lot of stuff through that strait in terms of China.
And there's a lot of reporting right now that says that China actually did put a lot of pressure on Iran, and they have a lot of power with the Iranian regime, and that they did do that. Yep. So, they want to have oil markets relax. They need the oil, like you mentioned last week on the show. They need the oil too. Oh yeah. And they don't want this going on. So, so far, I think it's a good day.
Well, at the end of the day, let's face it, a lot of this is about the oil. And for the people out there who don't understand that oil and gas make the world go around, just look at the last few weeks. I'm just telling you, just look at the last 2 weeks. I shared on the show last week or two, and you didn't see this on any of the networks, how much oil America consumes weekly and monthly and annually, and how much oil China now consumes weekly, monthly, and annually, and it will blow your mind. I mean, and I think it was 7 billion barrels a year, but it is interesting. The other thing, Neil, is if you're, how do I say this? If you're a Democrat, and you can't stand the Trump administration, you don't like what they did in Venezuela, you don't like what they're doing now, if this comes out where this 2-week period holds, and if the agreement makes a safer, better world, and things are flowing through the strait, and the uranium's not a threat, and prices come down here, this isn't very good news for Democrats here at home, even to say, look at, this is off the rails, this is terrible, because how do you say it's not good at that point?
Well, I think that's the thing, is that Trump has had successes in the past when everything is against him. Yeah. And this may be another situation. I think the Democrats have a lot of energy because a lot of them are very much anti-Trump, period. And that energy is showing up in polling. That's to the Democratic advantage. But I do think as we go into the summer, if the stock market's doing well and people feel okay about the status of the world, I think it'll be a more competitive situation in November.
All right, Neil, make it a good one. Enjoy this Wednesday. Thank you, Neil Levesque, Institute of Politics, St. Anselm College. All right. We are going to talk some affordable housing this morning, 10 o'clock. We have our friends from Procon talking about how they're doing it and delivering results to provide affordable housing. One of the things we're going to get to, and I was speaking with Phil Taub earlier, some of the mission and Matt Mayberry, New Hampshire home builders, and some other stakeholders, is I want to raise awareness, and we'll do this over the next week or two on the show. To talk about veterans specifically, so developers out there building apartments and new homes can understand how they can provide affordable rent and homes for veterans and their families to buy, because there are specific things that we don't really focus on the veteran community. And there's a lot of veterans on a fixed income right now that are having a hard time paying rent and affordable housing. And we're going to try and get some veteran specific solutions on affordable housing as well. Hey, Alexa, Google play the Pulse of an H. Jack Heath, J-Dog on the boards. He's back from Cleveland in one piece. Back in a moment.
News. New Hampshire. You're listening to Good Morning New Hampshire with Jack Heath on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
All right. Hey, happy to welcome in or announce New England College is our new studio sponsor. New England College, our new studio sponsor here. Good Morning New Hampshire, each morning, 9 to noon weekdays, the Pulse of an H. So New England College, welcome to the studios, if you will. And it's interesting, New England College, I was talking to their media folks yesterday, speaking of journalism, and they have a new media center where the next generation of journalists are taught to do it right at New England College. So you'll hear more on that. It's interesting with all the stuff that's been happening in the Middle East. We've sort of taken our eyes off the ball of some things here at home, but it was hard not to yesterday because if things went sideways, and this got worse last night, in terms of the infrastructure for 90 million people, I don't think the markets would be up more than 1,200 points this morning here. I don't think Wall Street would be up more than 1,200, and oil down more than 20% right now, surging down. Oil down, markets up. Now, I don't know how long. I'm on we're going to hear from Doug Tengden in a little bit. I don't know how long. It's always a latent, a later effect. I don't know how long it takes for, with oil prices coming down before you actually see it at the pump, because you got to remember, a lot of these gas stations that you drive by every day where you see that price up there, $3.91, or $3.93 or $3.89 a gallon for regular. Once their tanks are full, they have to go through that. And then when they buy the next shipment, if you will, in delivery, they adjust their prices. It takes a while. And it might be, I don't know, if this holds and the Strait of Hormuz continues to be wide open and we start getting flow going, even though that's international. We one thing we learned with the hostilities and the war with Iran is it is a global energy market. Certainly, you may not think so, but it is. And we can talk about reducing our dependency, but once that global world price is set for a barrel of oil, it's set. And I don't know how long it will take for prices to come back down, but how about this? The sooner the better. How about that? The sooner the better. And, I think everyone the last few weeks has been kind of in that same boat. And the one thing I said the other day, these are the little things that no one really, people, it's easy to forget. Put your politics and your self-importance aside for a moment. I mean that sincerely, no offense. Put yourself and your own self-importance aside. We have a lot of military deployed right now, not just in the Middle East and in around the situation with Iran, but I'm talking around the world. But right now we have a lot with that, including right out of the Pease, refueling that, the Air National Guard at Pease, right in the seacoast, right in, Portsmouth, Newington, the seacoast. We have families. We have families that are impacted because their loved ones are deployed with the refueling wing. And that air rescue of the crew member the other day, the backseater on that jet, Easter Sunday, that was, I saw one of the reports, there were more than 40 refueler planes like we have at Pease involved in fueling the jets and the planes and the aircraft that were using that rescue, hundreds. So there's a lot of families where their kids are going to school today in our school systems. And, Easter just happened, and that's a, nice day to celebrate with family and friends if you celebrate Easter. And if your dad or mom was deployed, they weren't with you, or they're not with you. They're not in the household today at night, going to bed at night and locking the door and making sure everything's good for the next morning. They're deployed. And we so easily forget that. We had a guest in the studio, I'm not going to say the name, recently, and their son, they're very proud, in the last year and a half became a Navy SEAL. And he's on a SEAL team, and guess what? He's assigned, and they haven't heard from him for, weeks or a month, and they won't hear from him for a while until he gets back to a domestic base, whether it's in San Diego or Virginia or wherever his team is. And he can safely say, we're training, we're stateside, and I'm okay. But we easily forget. And then this is the other thing that is very important to remember. Less than 1% serve our country. Think of that for a moment. Less than 1% in the military. And, I say that because we are very self-absorbed. We're just such a short-term, short-focused, impatient society. Excuse me, very self-absorbed about our own self-importance. And what makes it worse with social media today is people, whatever side of the political fence you're on whatever issue, you're right, they're wrong. And there's no ground at all to find common agreement that maybe I'm not right on everything. Maybe you have a point. And maybe I could respect your point. No, it's all one way or the other. And here's a real kick in the shins that no one's talking about. Because, again, we don't have the bandwidth sometimes. But if you look at how long this temporary partial government shutdown has been going on, I peg it back to mid-February. I remember it was right around Valentine's Day, right? This so-called hypocritical, in my opinion, stupid partial government shutdown. This has been going on, again, I think it was mid-February. How long has the partial government shutdown been going on? And I'm pretty sure it was mid-February. So think about that. It's now what? Is it 52 days? And it's all over DHS Homeland Security funding. People have literally forgotten about this. The first government shutdown back in October, November was over the Affordable or Unaffordable Care Act or health insurance. People forgot that because of the COVID era tax subsidies. Everyone was up in arms. Everyone's going to lose their health insurance and all that. Everyone's forgot that one. This one was over the Homeland Security, but what it was really over was the politics, the very raw politics of ICE, immigration enforcement policies, and ICE. It was over that. And then, of course, TSA got screwed for how many days or weeks, and Coast Guard, but mainly the TSA at the airport. So President Trump signs the executive order, but this thing is still going on. And people don't even know that. It's still going on. Partial government shutdown right now is still going on. Was it 52 or 3 days? It's now the longest. And how about this one? Today's Wednesday. Your members of Congress are still on a paid recess. This is their second week of the so-called paid, they're paid no matter what. It's the TSA agents that weren't paid. The Easter recess, like you and I get 2 weeks off of a paid vacation over Easter. No, we don't. But Congress does. They're still on Easter recess this week through Friday, and they still haven't gone down there. And I don't know why the leadership on both sides of the aisle didn't keep them down there in Congress and say, you aren't going on this two-week recess. You're going to sit here. You're going to work together, reopen the government fully, figure it out, and then we're going to start looking at this debt staring us in the face of almost $40 trillion. I don't even want to calculate in what it is now because of the last 3 or 4 weeks. But I got to tell you, no one's talking about the fact that Social Security in 6 years or less is insolvent. And I think a lot of people out there care about those monthly Social Security checks. But what do I know? Markets, though, this morning, they are shooting up. They're liking the news of a 2-week ceasefire. Will it hold? That's our poll question up on X. And oil shooting down already. I can't believe this, more than 20% to about $90 a barrel. And it will take a while before we feel or see this at the pump or home heating oil or diesel. Hey, Alexa, hey, Google, play the Pulse of an H. J-Dog's back from Cleveland. He had a good time, but he said it was a little chilly. Back in a moment.
107.
Granite.com.
This is where the Granite State comes to talk. This is the Pulse of New Hampshire. This is Good Morning New Hampshire with Jack Heath on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
All right, we are back. I will start saying it till the official open is produced with our great professional production team. But we, the New England College Studios, welcome back. J-Dog on the boards. We haven't even had time to catch up with you, Dog. I know we have a lot going on. Top of the 10 o'clock, we're going to talk with our friends at ProCon, affordable housing, with some solutions that are working. And that's probably one of the number one public policy issue. You know, last week I was on a tear on these incredible property tax increases that communities keep putting on property taxpayers, and hit some nerves on that one. And I'll come back to that in a moment on property taxes. But J-Dog, we haven't, other than you saying to me before the show, Cleveland, CJ did a great job filling in for you. We had a busy few days, kind of a tense few days with what was going on, especially yesterday, but great expertise this week from our retired fighter pilot, military expert locally, Tim Hafner. And of course, we had some other great special operations commanders calling in after the rescue on Easter Sunday of the airman, the crew member. But J-Dog, overall, good time in your beloved Cleveland for the Guardians. And also you saw, a basketball game?
In hockey, don't forget the Polish boys. The Cleveland Monsters were the Polish boys.
Oh, you saw, was that a hockey game?
So.
What was that?
Polish boy. They were the Polish boys, which is a kielbasa, of course. So.
But you went, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. You said you went to the hockey as well?
Yes.
Oh, wow. But not a good time because of the weather?
Weather, and again, cold and lonely.
Cold and lonely. I'm going to leave it there. It sounds like
Thank you. Please.
Sounds like a Faulkner novel. One of the things I was talking about was in the last week or so, and this all of a sudden passed, right? Cities like Concord, New Hampshire made a big deal that they passed this new budget, and they cut positions in the school budget, which is the biggest cost of the rising city budget, but they passed a 12.2% property tax hike on their property taxpayers, and they've been raising property taxes now for I don't know how many budgets, and at what point? I mean, Dover has a tax cap, and they were battling the same thing on, do we blow through the spending of a tax cap, which is supposed to cap taxes locally? And all this is caught up because you have a leading Democrat who's not running for governor, and he's not running for office right now, but Andrew Walensky is very pronounced and well known. He's written books about this, and he's been on my show. I'll get him on again, but he came out at the State House a number of weeks ago proposing this $1 billion or whatever it's, income tax for New Hampshire under the auspices of the premises with a property tax, and it's going to provide, relief on all this. But, I've been around this, let's just say I've been around this oval a few years and seen a thing or two. And I'm looking at, I always love this when people get caught up in debates on saying, well, if we had an income tax and we had a sales tax, and if we had an income tax, our property taxes would be lower. Okay, if you believe that, if you really believe that, I'm going to tell you, I got some wonderful oceanfront property for you in Columbus, Ohio. You don't raise one big tax to lower anything. Taxes go one way, they go up. But anyway, with that aside, if you don't want to get caught up in a debate with someone, and I do respect Andrew Walensky's passion, and if he's listening, Andrew Walensky's written books about it. He goes back to the original Claremont lawsuit on funding public education in New Hampshire. He's been an executive counsel. I do respect his passion. I do. I'm not being flip at all in that or sarcastic. There's no double-handed compliment. I do appreciate his passion, and he can call in, or I'll schedule him. I'll get him on. We should. We've been overdue, but with things in the Middle East, it kind of took a front seat. But 603-228-2080 if he wants to call in. You can try and sell this all day long. New Hampshire needs an income tax to lower local property taxes. No, it doesn't. And all you got to do, if you want to prove your case, is point to Massachusetts and Maine and Connecticut and every New England state around us that is seeing double-digit property tax increases, and they got all the taxes in the world. I mean, heck, Massachusetts doesn't have one, they have two income taxes and a sales tax. Maine wants to also have two income taxes, one for the quote unquote couples who make $1 million a year, and the other one for all the blue collar hard workers. Maine's got all the taxes, plus they got all the new taxes, everything from streaming video to legal cannabis to tobacco to pensions. They've raised taxes on your hunting and fishing licenses, your ATVs in Maine. They're taxing anything that moves. Maine will tax anything that moves. And they got high property taxes. I have 5 sets or 4, I got to count, 4 or 5 sets of brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws in the state of Maine. And all they do is telling me about their property taxes are going up and up and up. And I don't even get me going on Connecticut. I'm not going to waste my breath. Don't get me going on Connecticut and, Vermont. Don't get me going. They call it a progressive income tax in Vermont. Yeah, progressive, you know what? It's a regressive income tax. It's the highest level is almost 9% of your income. And they're raising property taxes in Vermont. I mean, heck, Mayor Wu in Boston, Mayor Wu in Boston, where they got all these taxes, 2 income taxes, raised property taxes on Boston property tax payers by almost 13%. So don't tell me that an income tax is going to cure my migraine, my back pain, or my property taxes. The one thing that's going to cure your property tax increases is the city and town managers managing your community stop screwing over the property taxpayers, because that's what you're doing when you're pricing them out of their home. And I said on the show the other day, in all due respect to these people, and I appreciate you doing the job because it's thankless, and I mean that. To be a city planner, I guess town and city managers are paid like full time, but to be on one of these boards, you're never going to have enough money for the school budget. Trust me, you're never going to have enough money for the school budget. You're never going to have enough money for the roads or the parks or the music program or the arts program, but you got to live with what you have. And you can't keep doubling property taxes every year on your property taxpayers. They're not going to be able to afford their home. So I asked the moral question a few weeks ago. What is more moral and ethical? To eliminate some positions in a school budget, to cut spending, knowing that those people, as bad as that news is going to be to get a pink slip, can probably get another job in this economy, or they have better chances to get another job than a property taxpayer who's been in their home 10 or 15 years and has seen their annual property taxes go from $5,000 to $15,000 a year. And some of these couples are getting older on fixed incomes and want to retire, but they can't retire because they're paying $15,000 a year in property taxes. What's more moral? Forcing them out of their home because that's what you're doing, or laying off positions? I think the latter is a little more ethical and reasonable. But we didn't have time to amplify that because of all the news breaking out in the Middle East. But that just happened in the last week or so. A lot of these towns and cities, and if you look at how much they're spending per public school student, and everything was happening in the Middle East, and then I got off this commentary and story, but I used Concord not to pick on the city of Concord. But I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, they're spending like $23,000 a year per public school student. 23 grand a year. And you're saying you don't have enough money to run the schools, and all of a sudden you find out you got a $17 million problem in your budget? Imagine running a business like that halfway through the year. Oh, sorry, we got a $5 million hole in our budget. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not saying the cost of things are coming down. Everything is too damn expensive, but don't price people out of their homes, especially people who've been living in a community for 10 or 20 years. And all around us, I'm hearing these property taxes. Couples say, Jack, 5 or 7 years ago, we were paying $7,000 or $8,000 a year in property taxes. Right now, they're up to $14,000. They've doubled. And don't tell me the price of their home has doubled. Yes, it has. But the point is, they can't sell their home. They could sell it and make some money, but where are they going to move to? Where are they going to move to? Everything's expensive. So let people stay in their home in a community and stop pricing them out of their homes. You can manage. Businesses have to manage. Households. How about this? Your property taxpayers have to run their household. Money in, money out. They balance the books. Some commentary. Come back. We'll talk about affordable housing. Our friends at Procon a little bit later on. Colette Travel in the studios. You want to go to the British Landscape Tour this fall? Stay tuned for 10:35. Hey, Alexa, Google. Jack Heath. Play the pulse of an age. Back in a moment.